Sports Professor Rick Horrow, Beyond the Scoreboard, the show that goes inside the trillion-dollar business of sports. It's even more than a trillion: marketing, deal-making, news, politics, administration, culture, even to the point of naming potentially a federal holiday. Taping this on Monday and guaranteed driving out of Atlanta, it was a fine time for the Patriots and not a fine time for the Rams. Traffic lighter, of course. People calling in sick. Antacid sales up. Pepto-Bismol sales up. All the guacamole, all the chips, all the commercials. Everybody focusing on the business of sports one day a year. It's a holiday for all of us who focused on it every day a year. Certainly all of the networks, all of the platforms. And just to give you some perspective, the Patriots obviously win 6 times in 18 years, but NFL doesn't waste a beat. They begin by talking about the next season and the celebration of a 100-year game. We talk about Super Bowl 54 on February 2nd at Hard Rock Stadium in 2020, and you almost can't even begin to understand how the NFL really never sleeps. We'll talk about that again today, including some philanthropic aspects that I was really honored to be part of last week in Atlanta, United Way, in conjunction with Man of the Year Dan Marino, others like Anquan Bolden, Man of the Year, as well as Brian Gallagher, the head of United Way, all coming together as a major effort created by EverFi to increase awareness on a whole bunch of stuff. We'll talk about that in a minute. But if you want to see all of the 15 issues, power, tech, and regular sports business issues, and it's not just all Super Bowl, look at NBCWashington.com, look at the NBC family, at Rick Horrow, HorrowSports.com. Subscribe to us on the Apple Podcast, Audio Boom, Google Play. Look for us on Stitcher. All of the normal places that content like this is found, and you can't get it anywhere else. And you can't get the Super Bowl anywhere else. Kind of excited about what it is.
We're going to take a short break, but when we return, more Rick Horrow, the sports professor. Welcome back to Beyond the Scoreboard with Rick Horrow. We pick up right where we left off.
And where it's been. And most important, I guess, you could talk about the NFL as an ongoing entity. Atlanta itself, it cost $70 million to put the event on. And in fact, competition, however, remains keenest it's ever been. The Journal-Constitution had an article where it reported that the city of Atlanta volunteered to provide enhancements beyond the bid. $2 million for game expenses, $375,000 for a media party. On top of the NFL's lengthy list of demands, Atlanta's bid, $46 million provided for local law enforcement, hotel rooms, promotion, insurance, decor. Costs associated with the use of Mercedes-Benz Stadium, team practice sites, venues for ancillary events, 10,000 parking spots, also covered by the city. Atlanta's bid covered by a mix of public-private money. 2 business donated $20 million. $16 million comes from the designated hotel tax fund, which is created to bring in special events. And $10 million comes in the way of tax exemptions on tickets. The Atlanta Host Committee estimated that the game would bring in about $185 million. Minneapolis said $450. Who knows what's right? Who knows what's wrong? But obviously, the number up for debate. But no one can say there isn't a significant benefit to Super Bowls. We're going to have Brett Daniels, the guy that runs the Atlanta Super Bowl Host Committee, on next week to give us his assessment of the Super Bowl from Atlanta a week after the event. Tampa Bay, L.A., Arizona, New Orleans, Miami host the next 5 and expects Vegas to get a game over the next decade as well. My question, if this was so expensive and it didn't make any sense, why is everybody bidding for it? Well, look at what happens with the commercials themselves. IEG said that total sponsorship spending on the NFL and its 32 teams grew 5.1% to about $1.39 billion in the 2018-19 season, driven by a spate of new league-wide sponsorships, including Intuit, McDonald's, Pizza Hut, and Sleep Number. Also contributing to the sum was a major spike in the casino gaming category, including the NFL's recently announced deal with Caesars Entertainment. And from a category perspective, beer companies, the biggest NFL investors, spending 4.3 times more than any other category. You look at the commercials, it's obvious you see it how. Last week, Visa renewed its deal with the NFL to serve as the league's official payment services technology partner through 2025. They've been an NFL partner for more than 24 years. Moving forward, Visa will contribute with the league to make all events in the NFL cashless, including the Super Bowl. So my question is, if the corporations thought it was too much money, why would a company like Visa hang with the NFL for 24 years? Philanthropically, NFL home run. RISE, the Ross Institute for Sports Inequality, held a number of events in Atlanta last week, including youth events and an exhibit at the NFL Experience called Champions of Change. RISE board member Paul Tagliabue and the new CEO Diane Billings-Burford told assembled media on Thursday their efforts are part of a mission to be more proactive. Our focus is how to keep RISE in our mission of educating the sports community and empowering sports leaders to address racism and make our country better, she said. RISE work with Rams and Dolphins during the season on community-based efforts around racism, and both Tagliabue and Billings-Burford noted the success of RISE within the Rams, a 10-week program focused on around two vastly different high schools in Southern California. RISE executives view their work as complementary and additive to that of the NFL Players Coalition, who also held signature events in Atlanta over Super Bowl week. What is also cumulative and additive are the other philanthropic organizations who take care of events around Atlanta. EverFi hosts its stunningly effective character playbook and also generates some significant support from United Way. They had a big dinner honoring executives, and Brian Gallagher, the chair of United Way Worldwide, the president, also took part in the festivities. Dan Marino, Anquan Bolden, two men of the year from the NFL, 17 years apart. Founders Tom Davidson and John Chapman from EverFi, Brian Cooley, the global marketing director. I was honored to co-host and participate. Here are some of the comments from the event now.
All right. If everyone can grab a seat here in the next moment. If you have one, I know we have some guests here that are just with us for part of the evening. Good evening, everyone. My name is John Chapman, one of the co-founders and presidents of EverFi, and I was telling a few people earlier tonight that we really like having these intimate dinners. It's a great chance to have a more intimate conversation. It's also, now I've learned, very hard to get an interesting and engaged group of individuals to sit down. But I think we're there, and I really appreciate that. I wanted to make a couple of introductory remarks before we get on with our program and our dinner tonight. First of all, I want to just thank everyone for being here this evening. We have a number of important executives from the United Way, organizations here in Atlanta, current and former NFL players, as well as many of my colleagues at EverFi. I wanted to tell you a quick story to frame our conversation for tonight. My birthday was yesterday. And so when your birthday's on January 29th, growing up, you get to have your birthday during Super Bowl week your whole life. So growing up as a boy in the 80s, all my birthday parties were Super Bowl parties. I had Super Bowl cakes and footballs and all that kind of stuff. And so it was a lot of fun. And I really, grew to love and admire the National Football League. And I also remember the fact that, see these cool commercials highlighting the work that the National Football League was doing with the United Way. And I was like, didn't really understand what that was as a young kid. But I always kept it in the back of my head. That's really cool. Fast forward about 30 years later, started EverFi in 2008 with my business partner and dear friend Tom Davidson, who's here tonight. We started EverFi with the idea that we wanted to build a technology company that could create networks that taught students and individuals of all ages eventually critical skills. We think about critical skills, we think about things like financial literacy, understanding your career, understanding how to to be respectful of each other, understanding, issues that really put pressure on communities, whether they be towns, cities, colleges, or schools. And we had an idea that we could eventually build that network to be big enough where we could attract the best organizations in the world to ultimately get behind what we were trying to do, teaching those skills to kids in communities. And so then you fast forward till about 2016, and we had an opportunity to have a conversation with United Way and the NFL about the critical skill of character education. And at that point, our school network had grown to, at about that point, about 20,000 schools. Today, we're in about 25,000 schools and growing across the U.S. and soon to be globally. And we thought to ourselves, I think we can activate that network with the biggest brands in the world, the biggest organizations that can have an impact on these important issues. And so from there, we decided to launch Character Playbook. And we're really proud to be here this evening to celebrate the first few years of Character Playbook. We're in our fourth academic year, and we're very, very excited to have reached over 350,000 students with this program all across the country. These are mostly middle school students that are learning about how to show good character, how to have healthy relationships, how to have an environment in your school that's productive and conducive to learning. And doing that through the powerful platform of people they look up to on the athletic field, players in the NFL, as well as the wonderful community stewards that represent the United Way and communities all across the United States. We couldn't be more proud of the fact that we've run this program as a partner, a true partner of those two organizations. And it's really neat to have grown up loving the Super Bowl and to be actually, now 45 years later, I turned 45 yesterday, to be here during Super Bowl week in Atlanta with two proud partners of ours, the United Way and the NFL, to talk about Character Playbook and to hear the perspectives of former players, current players, and others about that. Before I hand it over to the panelists, I quickly want to have one of our other co-hosts.
We're going to take a short break, but when we return, more Rick Horrow, the sports professor. Welcome back to Beyond the Scoreboard with Rick Horrow.
Host of the evening,
we pick up
Rick
right
Horrow,
where we left
who's
off.
been a great colleague of ours here at EverFi and was instrumental in bringing tonight together, to make a couple quick remarks, and then we'll hand it over to the panel and we'll get rolling.
When John asks me to make some comments and he says a couple quick remarks 4 times, I will keep it quick. I understand. And I understand there's shrimp and lobster ahead of this. The sports business today is $1 trillion business, maybe even more. And the fastest growing segment in that business is sports philanthropy, broadly defined. And people are doing it now, not only because it's the right thing to do, but there is a nexus and connection between ROI and business certainty and reasons why people will make those investments. And so EverFi has been that bridge, and John and partners should be commended for that. The other piece, obviously, is the relationship with United Way. The Character Playbook and the relationship with the NFL is timely, appropriate, consistent, stable, and a beacon for everybody all over the industry. We have a book that's going to be published in 2 weeks called The Sport Business Handbook. 100 of the brightest, or at least the best minds in the business who have commented on the anniversary of 50 years of the sports business. John has a chapter devoted exclusively to sports philanthropy. So this is a great opportunity to have people come together. I'd like to thank everybody who's involved in this, and also have a pleasure to recognize 2 men of the year, one recent and one 17 years before, friend Dan Marino, who together are amazing, and Anquan and Dan will put on a great show. But I will tell you, it's a special night for me, and I'm incredibly excited to be part of it. Without further ado, Cynthia Freeland, NFL Network.
Thank you so much. Probably for the recording purposes, right? So my name is Cynthia Freeland, if you're wondering who I am. I work for the NFL Network, and I'm very lucky, and it's never lost on me that I get a chance to work with a bunch of Hall of Famers. I don't often get to be in even a room with 2 men of the year. So this is an absolute pleasure. You guys should all be so excited that both Dan Marino and Anquan Bolden are here helping us with this. When we talk about sports, there really is no greater team sport than football. Every single motion, the complementary aspect of absolutely all of it is really this great parallel parallel for what EverFi is doing, the enablement of making education so accessible for so many different 350,000 people. Like that's a mind-boggling number of especially middle schoolers who are kind of like a tough crowd, right? So Brian Gallagher, who's the CEO of the United Way. I didn't realize 45 years of NFL partnership with the United Way. That's an incredible amount of time. And this particular endeavor, Character Playbook, 3 full years into the 4th academic season. Just tell us what that's meant to you and how this like really impacts everyone.
Thanks. It's great to be here. It's first, let me just recognize Anquan and Dan. These are the two. Well, let me just say it because two great human beings. And as I talk about Character Playbook, it's essentially this partnership has just gone from broadcast to digital. But the objective's the same. How do you highlight men of character? Whether it was the broadcast PSA that Dan did a number of years ago, or today. 92. No, I didn't want to say how many years ago. He, like us, had to digitize it or it would have disintegrated in his attic. But the idea was the same. Take the helmet off these players, show them as human beings. It was good for us because it took kind of the caring part of United Way, took the strength and the vitality of the NFL, and the United Way NFL partnership now has brand equity as a brand itself because it's such a powerful combination. So what we did in the digital age, trying to get to the Fortnite generation, was let's get to middle schoolers. Let's let them teach each other about how to act. It's in a digital, so EverFi was a partner that developed this emotional social learning curriculum. Teachers love it because it's a 45-minute kind of plug and play. If you ever watched it, middle schoolers come in and, they've all been bullied, seen bullying, in person, cyberbullying, and it's essentially just taking them through role plays and they talking with each other about how would you step in on that? Could you confront that person? How would you act? Do you feel respected? And it's they teaching each other, and it's because it's a digital world, but it's still the same thing. It's about character, and it is amazing. We're the partnership now started in all the NFL markets, and it's now in 3,700 middle schools, 350,000 kids, and I won't get ahead of the announcement, but it's going to expand dramatically this coming year.
That's fantastic. That's something that when you talk about the character and connecting athletes, there's no deeper connection than, you can see it on Twitter or even Instagram, any of these digital platforms that connect. Every time Dan Marino, who you haven't played in a little bit of time, just a little bit, every time he's on the screen, every time he does everything, you see these children light up. They get it. They totally get it. Every time, Anquan, they talk about there's this catch that happened for him. Just if you're familiar with those kind of catches, in certain specific games that are very important games, and people they want it, they reenact it. These children, you see it every single time. So the deepening connection of that is incredibly powerful, especially kind of translating it to the digital age. So, Dan, for you, I want to know how you feel working with these children, talking to them, being responsible for this, carrying this torch of, character and character building.
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, thank you, and glad to be here. And I was in a United Way commercial way back in the day, and I still have it, like you said, on digital. And it was awesome back, 92 or 91 or whatever it was. But I mean, as far as kids and character, is that the question we're asking?
Well, how does it make you feel?
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest thing anymore is I talk to my kids about communicating, making eye contact, talking. Like everything is on your cell phone. Everything. I mean, that's just off the top of my head right now. That's one thing I would say that is important for young kids to learn is how to communicate, how to be a part of the community. And the biggest thing is building relationships, because I remember coming from where I came from in Pittsburgh, and everything I've done in my life has been built on relationships and people that I've gotten to know over the years, and business-wise and football and the teamwork and everything that's gone on in my life, it's always been that way. And I think it's important for young kids, no matter what it is, if you're a teenager now or if you're in your 20s or 30s, that building those relationships is extremely important in any walk of life that you may endeavor. But all right, there you go.
Vanna here. Vanna White here with us. Well, because I just wanted to get good for the video. Anquan, your foundation, can you tell us a little bit about that and how that kind of filters to everything that EverFi is trying to do and like folds so perfectly in with the brand responsibility for all of it, what you're doing for kids and education in this space?
Yeah, so the Anquan Bolden Foundation, I think we started it my second year in the NFL. And although we've done a lot of things over the years, as of late, we've really geared everything towards education. Education is huge in my household. It was huge for me as a kid. My parents were real big on education. And I come from a less fortunate area, and it's kind of sad to say, but my parents couldn't afford college. But also back then, if you had a high school education, you had the ability to provide for your family. This day and age, that's no longer true. I mean, if you want to be able to provide for your family nowadays, you at least have to have a college degree to be on level playing field. So noticing that over the years, like I said, we've taken a lot of our foundation is geared towards helping people advance in education. We have a summer enrichment program that we do now for kids that have fallen behind in school. We help them to get on track to graduate. And we've now, 6 years? So we've had the program for 6 years, and we have a 92 completion rate, which is pretty good where I'm from. Yeah. And me and my wife also, we did an endowment for $1 million to each year we do 4 scholarships for graduating seniors to be able to continue their education. And like I said, I come from a less fortunate area, so a lot of the people where I'm from were like me, they can't afford college. They're migrant kids, their parents are farm workers. So if not for the scholarships, a lot of these kids wouldn't go to college. But we've been able to see how having a college education can dramatically change your life, and not only your life, but your kids and their kids. So we've been heavily focused in on education. That's something that we can continue to push on kids. It's not just a cliche because we've actually seen it work.
Passing is really good. So I think that one of the cool things about this particular partnership is you see the role that corporations and for-profit institutions have with nonprofits and how all of this together can have one shared mission statement. So it's not necessarily just, earning profits, right? It's about creating a better educational opportunity going forward using nonprofits, for-profits, all of these different types of organizations that can come.
We're going to take a short break, but when we return, more Rick Horrow, the sports professor. Welcome back to Beyond the Scoreboard with Rick Horrow, the sports professor. We're going to rewind our featured interview, reset the show
that can come together for a shared goal and kind of unite around Rick some of these programs. So just to give a sense of kind of where are the kids most interested? Like, what are the kids actually doing? Do they want the financial literacy stuff? Like, what do they want to know? Like, where are people looking? What are they doing with the information?
All kids, when I was 13 or 14, a 13 or 14-year-old today, they may interact using different media, but they all want the same thing. They want hope. They want to know that, Anquan's right. It's You'd get a high school degree, you'd work in a mill, you'd work in textile or steel mill, or you get a good job. And if you don't see that, then after high school, and if you need college, you just shut down. So increasingly, what kids do is they have access to so much information, they just follow whatever they're interested in, because it's not as definitive anymore that you go on this track, or this track. I'll say this about for-profit companies, nonprofits, and kind of how the NFL relationship is changing. When it started, it was really with United Way and the league. And we still have a great relationship with the league. But because of digital technology and the upskilling that Anquan's talking about, and how job market's changing and how information flows, we're actually down more toward teams and even players. Players have their own platforms, their own brands, their own foundations. And so what that allows get into communities and start focusing on upskilling, if you will. There are going to be plenty of jobs in the United States. The problem is our young people aren't trained for them. And so not only do you need to go to college, you actually are going to need some vocational training. Look at all the digital devices in this room. These weren't jobs 10, 20 years ago. And more, that's going to be the future. So they're focused on, they're playing games on their phones, but their phone is going to be a part of their job going forward. And so how do you take digital technology, turn it into a passion, whether it's art or it's business or it's social work, whatever it is? That's what kids are interested in. They're interested in, what do I get to do next? And education systems are having to change to meet them where they are, which is why I think this partnership makes so much sense.
Okay, so that leads the inevitable follow of what's kind of coming up in the next year, and kind of all of you weigh in on what you're doing in the next year to further this whole education and character mission statement. You can pass it. You don't need these.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So my foundation, I say as far as furthering our mission statement and everything, we have a foundation that has been dealing with kids with developmental disabilities. My son Michael was born with autism a while back, and he was 2 years old then, got diagnosed, and now he's 30 or 29. Sometimes I get confused. I've been hitting the head a lot, so. But I think he's 29, and he's doing great. And what we concentrate on as far as our foundation is the future of kids after they leave the system of the school system. What's next? Like, what's job opportunities? What's your education? Internships, and then the internships turn into jobs, which very proud of. Very proud of. We've been doing that now for probably 5 or 6 years, and we have a school in FIU, Fort Lauderdale International University, and then also in Fort Lauderdale, downtown Fort Lauderdale. So we're dealing with a fairly good amount of kids, probably right now, probably 150 kids. And it's been very successful. I'm very proud of it. And from the start when Michael was 2 and we decided to start working with kids with autism or developmental disabilities, we've come a long way. And I think for me, the future is, where do they go from after high school through, the rest of their lives? Can we get them jobs? Can we make sure that their life skills are right? And that's the whole thing, and it's through education. So that's where we're at.
For myself, I'll continue to push education. We'll continue the programs that we've established in recent years. But I think for me, one of the things that I've started recently was mentoring. And although I've mentored kids over the years, I just see a huge need for young men to become men.
What does that mean?
Glad you asked. So there's I think a lot of people have different meanings of what it means to be a man, but I guess what we're trying to teach young men is how to have integrity, how to be reliable. And we talk to them about being the type of person that you would want to deal with. I mean, in the corporate world, nobody ever wants to deal with a person that they can't rely on. And it's the same way in life. And, we give them examples of, if you're dealing with a person and this person gives you their word and they don't come through 2 or 3 times, at some point you're going to stop dealing with that person. Because you are tired of being disappointed, you're tired of being let down, and you would rather deal with someone who, when I give you my word, I'm going to stand on it. But even if I give you my word and I can't come through, I will communicate with you and let you know why something isn't going to happen. These days, we have kids that hide from things. I mean, Dan talked about the relationship part. We were just talking earlier. He was talking about how his kids are in the same room and they're texting each other. And crazy. And like as a parent, that drives you nuts because we grew up in a different era. We grew up in a different day and time. We grew up in a day where you had to say yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no. I mean, and just those little things can take you so far. So helping kids build that character, helping them being men of integrity, helping them being men of their word is something that's important to me. And I see that it's lacking so much in the new generation. So that's where my focus is now.
That's what we learned on here. I can't thank you all enough for everything. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being such luminaries in this space and teaching us the way to be better people. I know I draw from it all the time in my work and my role, and I'm very grateful for everything that all of you do. Thank you so much for everything. Really, please give them a hand of applause.
All right, just want to also close up and thank our panelists for being here and offering their insight, and Cynthia for your moderation and needling us on the score at the end. I want to go into dinner now. Be remiss to say, though, hopefully you got a taste of what we're doing with Character Playbook and our partnership. I encourage you all to ask more about what we're doing. Ask how you can get involved. As Brian made a really good point, the world's changing in terms of the platforms that we all have, whether it's our company, a former player, a nonprofit. We are always looking for more hands on deck to further our mission of making this 350,000 more students the next time we get together, because it is important, and I think all of our panelists reinforce that today. So I thank you, bon appetit, and enjoy the rest of the evening, and thanks for being here.
Thank you.
It is an honor to be participating in a lot of these events. The NFL is special, and it's a very unique platform. The Players Coalition announced 6 groups that would receive funding this year. The Current and Former Players Group looks to address issues that would impact communities of color. It's funded through the $90 million from the NFL, awarded grants totaling $2 million to criminal justice and educational reform groups. Super Bowl press conference included Malcolm Jenkins, the aforementioned Anquan Bolden, included groups to receive money like the Center for Policing Equity, the National Juvenile Defender Center, the Justice Collaboration and Collaborative Engagement Project, and others. And last May, the Players Coalition donated $90 million to combat social inequity. This year, more announced recipients. And the diverse set of charities, by the way, that will receive funding displays the coalition thinking about the ongoing race issues in the NFL, as well as education and political reform. You take a look at all of the issues here, including what the NFL means to the league, the world, social justice now, and others. You realize that this is a platform like none other. One would hope that the issue that some would take away, which is the ability to opt out and have a major work stoppage in 2021, and in fact some are saying that it is an inevitable work stoppage. Let's put it this way. In a league that generates $16 billion a year, basically without flexing its muscles, and at the same time can generate such substantial social awareness and platform for good that's just now being capitalized on. Let's just hope that Roger Goodell and D. Maurice Smith can work it out. It's not naive. It's just a prediction that hopefully will turn into reality. Well, let's talk a couple of other things that are beyond football, although not too many people want to talk about that, but we'll deal with it later on. And as you realize, we're only 3 or 4 weeks from pitchers and catchers reporting. It's unbelievable. Major League Baseball, Nike, and Fanatics locked in a new 10-year global partnership that designates Nike as baseball's official uniform and footwear supplier starting next season. Nike is the one who will provide uniforms that is developed by their team and will provide fans with the widest assortment of MLB fan gear ever, manufactured and distributed by Fanatics. The deal kicks in 2020, but Nike will be the exclusive provider for all MLB on-field uniforms, along with base layers, game day outerwear, and training apparel for all 30 MLB clubs. Fanatics has been granted broad consumer product licensing rights to manage the manufacturing and distribution of the MLB Authentic Nike collection, and the timing is perfect as the pitchers and catchers getting ready for spring training, as we said, in the next few days. Tampa, one of those problem areas with the stadium, they don't have the stadium solution, but they have a cashless function in the stadium, all solved. According to their press release, this will result in faster moving lines and increased fan satisfaction. The initiative will apply to the purchase of tickets and available at the venues, food and drink, and merchandise. The new system will make its debut February 9 when the ballpark hosts its annual Fan Fest. Payments will be permitted through major credit cards, official club gift cards, Apple Pay, and Samsung Pay, as well as Raise cards provided to season ticket holders. Fans without any form of cashless payment will be able to swap cash for gift cards. And the Rays aren't alone. Rakuten announced in early January the team they own in baseball and in soccer would see their stadiums becoming cashless very soon. Well, when you pair Tampa, got to pair Oakland. You know the only reason you do that? Neither one have stadiums. But the A's announced plans for a new 34,000-seater waterfront ballpark back in November, slated to open in 2023, including the cable transport system, costing $123 million, according to team president Dave Cavall. The structure, privately financed, will require approval from various state and local agencies. The A's are the latest MLB franchise to consider building a gondola to enhance their ballpark fan experience. The Dodgers and the Nationals looking into their own gondola operations, and there are other teams, trust me, that I've talked to that have talked about the ability to do something kind of unique.
We're going to take a short break, but when we return, more Rick Horrow, the sports professor. Welcome back to Beyond the Scoreboard with Rick Horrow. We pick up right where we left off.
In the corner of the world, and obviously European soccer, with all of their positives, is the key to all of this. Finally, let's talk auto racing just for a minute, because we'll talk about it more as we get to the closer to the Daytona 500. But let's see what the impact gambling has. We've announced some new regulations, 2019. NASCAR introduced a policy that prohibits team owners, drivers, new members, and crew officials from gambling on events. Auto Week says NASCAR listed penalties for betting that could include indefinite suspension or termination and fines up $200,000. In October, Dover International Speedway became the first NASCAR track to introduce an at-track betting service. The new policy prohibits the equivalent of insider trading, prohibiting team owners, drivers, crew members, and series officials from disclosing confidential information for the purposes of, quote, facilitating gambling as it pertains to NASCAR events. The policy does allow NASCAR personnel to take part in fantasy as long as they don't get prizes of over $250. And like professional tennis and golf, motorsports' individual performance format makes races more susceptible to fixing than team stick and ball sports. It's right and appropriate that NASCAR is taking this incredibly positive and productive step. We covered a lot. Obviously, football almost over. Some would say the Alliance of American Football, which starts next week, means the next step. Others may disagree. We'll see. But the bottom line is we have a whole exciting raft of NBA All-Star Game, NHL heating up, and everything else that's going on in the coming weeks. We'd like to thank Dan Marino and Brian Gallagher from United Way and John Chapman and Brian Cooley from Everfi and Quan Bolden for giving me access and the ability to co-host an incredible event last week and to share some of it with you. We'd like to thank Brian again for being the kind of universal voice of United Way, along with his folks and Lisa Bowman for helping United Way get to where they are worldwide. We'd like to thank Dan Martin and Tanner Simpkins for helping us put the podcast together. We'd like to thank you for listening and watching and joining us next week when we go Beyond the Scoreboard.